Hey, it's Scott Bertram. If you haven't yet, now would be a good time to check out the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. It's over at podcast.hillsdale.edu. What's there? Free nationwide access to all of Hillsdale's podcast content. That includes shows like the Hillsdale Dialogues, the Radio Free Hillsdale Hour, the Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast, the Larry P. Arn Show, and now, new Imprimis. You can listen to any of those programs wherever you are and whenever you want, and it's always free. So find out more about all of our shows at podcast.hillsdale.edu. You can subscribe to any program you want. New episodes will come right to your device, or grab the Hillsdale College Podcast Network Superfeed, and you'll be the first to get access to all of the content posted on the site. If you want to come close to stepping inside a classroom here at Hillsdale College, well, the Hillsdale College Podcast Network is for you. Check it out at podcast.hillsdale.edu. That's podcast.hillsdale.edu.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Beyond the Bubble, a Hillsdale College Career Services production where we take you outside the classroom and into the professional arena to bring you special tips and tricks from recent alumni in all areas of practice. This show is part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More episodes at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you find your audio. I'm Lauren Scott, and joining me today is Trent Kramer from Hillsdale's class of 2013 and Headmaster at Ascent Classical Academies. Thank you for joining me today, Trent.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Tell me a little bit of what a day in the life looks like as a headmaster.
Oh, well, it's probably a fairly unique job because there are some days where you're doing really high-level strategic planning or you're building, programs and protocols that are going to help students be safe or successful or academically improving. And then there are days where, kids are puking in the hallway and you got to help clean that up, or you're doing car line. And so it is kind of an interesting job where you have to be able to do some really high-level planning stuff and support from the academic side of things. And then there's other days where you're helping with bloody noses and just kids being kids. And so it's kind of a fun job. It keeps you on your toes. No day is ever the same. And I think one of the beautiful things about my job, at least with my current setup, is I still get to teach. And I'm a teacher at heart, so I still have a class or two that I can teach on a regular basis. And so that keeps me rooted into the educational side of things, and I do love that. But yeah, no day's ever the same. So it's dealing with parents and dealing with students and sometimes community members, and so I do enjoy that part of the job. But it's kind of fun to see all of those different avenues of the school or different avenues of the job kind of play out in a way that all facilitates the mission of the school, and ultimately that's about helping help parents raise their kids up in the way of virtue, and that's a beautiful thing to be a part of.
What are some of the biggest challenges you face as headmaster, and how do you embrace and work through those challenges?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges is just being at a liberal arts or a classical school. You're doing a lot of things that are really anti what the educational establishment is doing, or it's just countercultural, maybe is another way of saying it. And so I think one of the difficult things is educating parents when they come and they're looking at the school about that we're really different and intentionally different. We don't fall into some of the same trends that most schools are. And so, take things like vocational, development or just focused on college preparedness is not something that we're really focusing on. We're trying to prepare kids for life. And so, we don't do AP classes or we don't have vocational tracks or things like that. And a lot of the parents that come to us are just, shocked that we don't have those other programs that other schools do. And when we explain to them why, it's often a little bit of a confusion start. So I think we're fighting a little bit of an uphill battle just because we're doing things very differently than what a lot of our counterparts are at schools down the road. So I think that's difficult. And then the other thing that's difficult is we're not just trying to help kids do well on tests. We're trying to help, them be people of good character. And when we're doing things like discipline, and when a kid messes up, we're really trying to speak to their heart and have them desire to be a good person for the sake of being a good human being, and not just to comply with the rules. And so, that is a long game. It takes a long time to develop these kids into the type of people that we wanted to develop them into. And so you don't always get to see the fruit of that initially. And so I think that's the other part of the difficulty is, you're trying to do work day in and day out, and you don't always see the fruit of it, sometimes 3, 4, 5, 10 years down the road. And so I think that's a difficult part of the job as well.
Like you just mentioned, one of the goals of a classical school is to instill virtue in its students. It's not just about making sure that the students are making straight A's. It's very much focused on who they are as human beings.
Yeah.
So with that being said, is it more difficult to find teachers to hire who will help fulfill this mission? Or what do you look for when hiring teachers?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the thing that I look for first and foremost is not, can you be a good instructor of whatever discipline or whatever grade? The first thing I look at in the whole first interview that I do, or my staff does, is, are you a person that we think our students are worthy of emulating? We don't want to, and I think that anyone who is a parent or in education for very long realizes that, yes, kids learn a lot explicitly. So whether it's the examples we give them from content, or whether it's, conversations about certain character developments or whatever it is, there's a lot of explicit ways that we can teach character. But ultimately, a lot of students are going to learn a lot more implicitly than they do explicitly. And so the models they have around them are what they're going to shape themselves off of. And so the first thing that I look for is someone who I would personally want my own children to be around. Are these the type of people that I want my children to emulate themselves after? And so I think it is harder because I'm not just looking for good instructors. I'm looking for good human beings first and foremost. And then I have to say, are you going to be a good instructor on top of that? And so I think it does limit the pool. I also think because of our unique mission in classical schools, and I know that the movement is growing around the country, there's still a lot of people that don't know what classical education is. And so sometimes we're looking for people that maybe are new to classical education, but they're akin to it. Like the things that they believe or the things that they value maybe are really, really aligned with us. They just don't know the words to the tune, if you will, right? One of my coworkers loves this analogy, but maybe they know the tune of the song, but they don't know the words yet. And so they might understand kind of implicitly what a good education is supposed to be and what we want as human beings to develop into. But they don't know the words to say, or maybe the phrases that we tend to use in classical education. So I do think it's harder. I think, when we look at teacher training or things like that, or whether we're hiring people that don't know classical education, you have to spend a lot of time on what's the philosophy that we want them to go at this type of teaching in, or, hey, I know you've been in a teaching program for the last 4 years, but I know you were told to do this way. This is actually how we want you to do it. So I do think not only is it harder to find people sometimes, but sometimes it's hard to find people that are willing to say, yeah, okay, I'm willing to do it the way that you want to see it done. Because it's so different than how they were trained to, or if they're a public school teacher for 20 years, they get really in these habits of how they like to approach things. And when we say, okay, that's great, and I know you've seen success with that, but this is how we'd like you to do it. So I think the challenge is not only in hiring people, but then training them to do things the way that we want to see them done.
How did you know that you wanted to have a career in education?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I actually owe a lot to some of my professors at Hillsdale for kind of directing me that way. I really didn't like school when I was in high school, and then I went to Hillsdale actually to play football. I didn't really realize what I was getting myself into going to Hillsdale, and I ended up falling in love with the education that I received there, and I ended up really loving what it did to my life. And how it drastically affected the trajectory of my life and my relationships. And I saw the impact that it had on my friends. And I was talking to a professor of mine at the time, Dr. Blackstock, and I said, hey, I really don't know what I want to do, but man, I really wish someone would have introduced me to classical education before now. Like I wish this was something that I would have been exposed to at a young age. And he just looked at me and goes, Trent, I think you want to be a teacher. And particularly in a classical school. I was kind of looking at some different avenues at the time, but that really just struck a nerve for me. And so I went to the classical school job fair and started talking to educators, and that's when I kind of just knew, like, yeah, this is something I wanted to do. And at the time, I just, the next step in front of me was being a teacher. I never really thought I'd want to be an administrator, and really kind of fell into that too. Even being an administrator, I started down the path of administration because I loved teaching teachers. And so I became kind of an assistant principal, mainly because I like training and supporting and giving instruction to teachers, because I still saw it as teaching. And that kind of path led me to being a headmaster, of taking that love for wanting to teach teachers, and the love for wanting to expand classical education, and an opportunity came along to help a community start a school. And so even kind of stepping into the headmaster role was something that has kind of just been a constantly building thing for me, that my intention was I wanted to share this education with other people. And I did that with my students in my classroom, and then there was an opportunity to affect teachers, and then they could turn around and affect that many more students. And then the idea of, hey, we could actually bring a whole new school to a whole new community. Do you want to be involved in that? So I feel like it's just been this regular trajectory of building, of wanting to share this love of and this appreciation for classical education that I received to as many people as possible, and that I've just kind of taken more and more steps down that road.
You mentioned that you still teach at the school even though
Mm-hmm.
you are the headmaster. Why do you think it is important for headmasters to still teach?
Yeah, I think for me, I wouldn't want to do the job unless I got to teach. I still, that's the favorite part of my day. I love it, and I think I've come to know, not only is it just something that I love and I want to do selfishly, I do think that there's a couple reasons why. One, I think people get into these higher level positions and they start to lose the reality of what it is that the school is even there for. And I think it's hard to lose that vision when you're in front of students every day and you still have to lesson plan and you still have to grade tests. And I'm going to be up late tonight grading a quarter test that I just gave last week. So there's things that keep me rooted into why it is that we do this thing. And so I think for me, I've seen immense value for staying connected to the students, because the school exists for serving the parents, but ultimately serving the students. So I think that's really important. But then the other part is just, I think for my faculty that I hire particularly, they're always surprised when I'm in the process of hiring and I say, I'm a teacher too, I teach this class. They kind of, same question you asked me, well, why do you do that? And I give the first answer too, but I also love the fact that one of my roles is to be the lead teacher. I mean, that's what the word headmaster really means, right? I should be able to, when I'm giving instruction to a teacher of, hey, I really feel like you should go about your classroom management technique this way. It's really powerful to say, come to my class and watch me do it. And so it's not just me stepping into their class and doing teaching demos, and I've done that in the past too, but I think there's something to seeing how would I set up my class? How do I do my lessons on a daily basis? And so I think that is really powerful for teachers to be able to step in and go, he's not just asking me to put my lesson plans into this folder. He's not just asking me to do this or that as a teacher, but he has to do those things as well. I think there's a really good element of the teachers seeing that when I'm making a decision for, hey, I think this is a really good thing for you to do in your class, that's affecting me as well. So I think those are a lot of reasons why I think it's important. And I've actually kind of made an expectation for all of my administrators that are at my campus. They teach at least one class. And I think that there's an immense value for whether it's myself as a headmaster or, my dean of faculty, or I even have a dean of students who does a lot of discipline stuff. She's a former Latin teacher, so she teaches our 6th grade Latin. I just think it's really good for those of us that are leading a campus to not lose sight of why it is that we're doing what we're doing. And I think that's just really, really important.
For students or alumni who are interested in becoming academic administrators, what do you recommend they do?
First and foremost, if you want to be an administrator in a school that is going to be involved in anything with academics or students or parents, I think being a teacher first and foremost is the thing that you need to start with. I think that you can be a decent teacher but not be able to be a good administrator. I have yet to meet an administrator that I'm really, really, really fond of and think very highly of that is also not a good teacher themselves. Because I think there's a lot of corollaries between leading people in an organization and teaching in a classroom. Same thing with things like coaching and players, and I do think that's a really good crossover of experience. But I think start off with being a good teacher in the school. The exception to that rule might be if you're, a marketing person or someone who's in the business realm or finance. There is, and I think a lot of people lose sight of this, there are business-minded roles in a school. A school is, in some ways, a functioning business that has to, actually budget well and steward their money well, and there are operational procedures and policies and things that have to be operated well. And so I would say that if they're wanting to be in the academic side of a school, teaching first. If you're wanting to pursue the mission of classical education and you're interested in more of the business side of things, then I would try to figure out if there's a position in a school or an internship in the school or something like that you can dive into to try to actually see what this business would look like from a school perspective. And so I think it just depends on which route a student or alumni is looking at trying to get involved in this. And I think Hillsdale does produce a lot of people that value education like I did, that don't necessarily want to be a teacher, but there is a place for them in furthering that mission. I have a really good friend of mine who I taught with for a while who he started teaching because he wanted to be a teacher because he liked the idea of it. But then when he started teaching, he didn't really like it. And now he's in policy, and he's trying to help make legislation that is actually going to bring about more freedom of things like charter schools or assisting private schools to further the classical movement in the country. And so there's a lot of other avenues that you can get involved in supporting the mission of classical education around the country without necessarily needing to be on the academic realm.
As a history major at Hillsdale, are there any classes or professors that you remember fondly?
Oh, many. My advisor was Dr. Berzer. I'm still a very, very big fan of him. Actually, I think my senior year, I had taken all of the classes that he was offering my senior year in the past, and he didn't have any more. So we did an independent study together on Civil War memoirs, which was just a blast. I loved that. Dr. Connor, I think his World Wars class might be one of my favorite classes I took at Hillsdale. So that was fantastic. And then I think it still fell in the realm of history, but I took a leadership class with Dr. Blackstock. That was the class that I kind of built that relationship with him, which he had kind of gave me the advice of going into teaching. Those are probably the highlights for me.
While you were a student, what were you involved in?
I was a member of the football team. So I played for 2 years, and then after 2 surgeries, I was medically retired, and then I student coached, which was really formative for me and helpful for me in a lot of ways. And then I was pretty involved in the Hillsdale Christian Fellowship. Actually my wife now and I co-led, at the time it was called The Well. I think the last time we were at Hillsdale, they called it Soma, but it was a student worship kind of ministry on campus. So I was really involved in that as well. So those are probably the 2 main areas that I was involved in. I was an RA at Simpson. So very big fan of Simpson Dormitory, and all the, shenanigans that went on at that dormitory when I was in college. So that was a lot of fun. I just had really, really good friendships and good relationships. And so, at Hillsdale, there's not necessarily a ton to do, not a lot of nightlife, if you will. And so just those conversations around a cup of coffee or driving to Coldwater to a donut shop to just, kind of have those times where you're having those conversations. And so I think that was probably for me too. I was involved in quite a few things. But the relationships and the long conversations having all night around philosophy or theology were probably the things I spent most of my time with and look back on fondly.
All right, Trent. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. Appreciate the time.
You have been listening to Beyond the Bubble, a podcast by Hillsdale College Career Services. This show is part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More episodes at podcast.hillsdale.edu. or wherever you find your audio. I'm Lauren Scott, and have a great day.
Do you believe in our founders' vision for America? That our republic will only survive if we are an educated and informed people who know our rights and duties. Since 1844, Hillsdale College has sought to educate all who wish to learn about these timeless principles of self-government. For more than 50 years, The college has worked to spread that mission by sending Imprimis to millions of Americans. Imprimis features some of the best speeches given at Hillsdale events, and now an audio version of the popular Speech Digest is available in a new podcast of the same name. And, like the print publication, Imprimis, the podcast, is always free. Listen to the best arguments from speakers such as Chris Rufo, Molly Hemingway, Mark Stein, and Hillsdale College President Larry Arnn, read by Hillsdale students. Subscribe today to listen to Imprimis at podcast.hillsdale.edu. That's podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you get your audio.